Start first with doing a little bit of an intro about who we are and about Atkinson. So I'm Sam Springer, and I'm a people and development consultant here at Atkinson. I joined in September last year. I've spent some time working with SMEs in leadership positions. So not my entire experience has not been specifically in HR, but I've spent a lot of time leading teams, going through training and mentoring teams. So I have quite a lot of experience in this area. And then I'll let my colleague Emily do her intro.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Smith, People and Development Consultant as well. So I joined the team in January, so I'm fairly new to the Atkinson's team, but I have been in HR my entire career, so predominantly in the private sector, doing generalist roles. So my most recent role, I was a senior business partner for about 6 years, doing all aspects of HR.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Atkinson. So they were set up in June 2017. We've got about 10 employees and 9 associates. And we focus and are really passionate about equality, diversity, and inclusion. Our clients include a range of charities and non-profits. We work a lot with student unions, as I'm sure many of you know. In 2019, we were the winner of the CIPD Best HR and L&D Consultant. So that's really good accolade for us. And we are a trusted supplier of NCVO. So, you know, we really try to help values-led organizations become even better employers. So that's our main focus for our businesses. So our webinar for today, the flow is going to be based on what do we mean by flexible working, and we may get you to give a little bit of feedback of your experiences, if you've had any, what comes to mind when you think about flexible working and things like that, just to make it a little bit more interactive. Why is it high on the agenda these days? I mean, you see it all in the news all the time, people talking about flexible working. Then barriers to flexible working. I guess like everything else with change, there's always going to be barriers to it. So we discuss the barriers to it and how to overcome the barriers of flexible working. And then we go specifically into the 4-day week, other trends as it relates to flexible working, future options, and supporting managers and buy-in.
Thanks, Sam. Turn myself off my mute, that would be helpful. So before we get started, sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot. I appreciate we've got quite a small group. Would anyone be willing to share what flexible working means to you? If you use the raise your hand function, or if you'd prefer to put something in the chat, that'd also be helpful. Kirsty?
So flexible working to us as an organisation and to me is the ability to work from anywhere that you want and the hours that you want to do that. And we have a flexible policy that means that staff can do that. There's no restrictions, there's no kind of set parameters in terms of you have to be in the office X, Y, and Z. So we are quite flexible in that regard, but it also leads to some challenges when there might be an expectation that groups come together to collaborate in the office, and people sometimes opt out of that, the office environment and the kind of the values as an organisation that we have, so that they're not necessarily seen by outside of their own small teams and by other people. So that is some of the challenges that we face at the moment with our flexible working. But I don't think that we'd massively change in terms of having that total flexibility to enable people to continue to either work from wherever they want to or from the office.
Perfect, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing, Kirsty. Emma, do you have something to share?
Hi, yeah. So the kind of definition of as I see it is really just what Kirsty had said there about that flexibility to work from wherever you like and kind of the hours. Excuse me. With us, we're more sort of kind of prescriptive in terms of depending on the teams, because obviously within the student union we have people that have to be in the building because they are customer facing. So unfortunately there is a bit of a kind of almost a divide there, I guess, where obviously people that have got office-based roles are more flexible. They can work in a hybrid fashion, perhaps doing a few days from home and a couple of days from the office. So we have a bit more structure, I think, to our hybrid working policy as part of flexible working.
Perfect, thank you. And I can see, Grishma, you shared a comment as well. So a way of working that's tailored to the individual. So thank you very much for that, everyone. That was really useful to understand what it means to you and your organisations. So I guess kind of summarising that then, a broad definition would be, so it's just a way of working that suits the employee's needs. So it's adjustment of your typical work pattern to suit their personal circumstances, which works for the organisation. I think the key that's really important when we're thinking about flexible working is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So everyone has different wants, needs, ways they work best, family commitments. So flexible working is going to be different for each individual. So it's really important we kind of hone in and understand what works for those individuals and not just have a collective approach. And then it's not letting me move on the slides, Sam. Brilliant, thank you. And I guess why is it high on the agenda now? So I think a big reason for that is the pandemic. So obviously a lot of people spent the best part of 2 years either working from home or adjusting the way they work in some way. So even though the pandemic was obviously really challenging, it did force organisations to have that home working trial, which allowed people to see that benefit where they can work from home, still achieve the same outputs, but actually get more time to spend with their family, spend with their friends, do their hobbies, avoid the rush hour. And people wanted that to stay. People didn't want to then go back to being in the office 5 days a week. I guess coupled with that as well, you've got increasing numbers of working parents that have obvious commitments that they need to do. An aging population, so you probably find a lot of your employees are in the middle of that. So they have commitments to children, but then they may also have commitments to elderly parents and have caring responsibilities. So people's lives are evolving and getting busier and busier. It's really making the need for flexible working practices to be really important for them. Interestingly, in a survey that the CIPD did, I think it was on the back of the pandemic, in 2021, I think it was done, 87% of colleagues stated that they either work flexibly or they wish to work flexibly. So that's massive numbers that we need to be kind of accommodating and seeing what we can do to support them, or you're going to disengage most of your workforce by not being open to seeing what we can do. It also found that 80% of people said home working has no detriment on their productivity. 32% of that, so a third of workers actually said working from home improve their productivity. So it's not to say that works for everyone. I know some people can't get on with working from home. They struggle to detach. They find it too distracting. Some people say the same about the office. So that just really goes back to the importance of really understanding your staff. So it's high on the agenda, kind of summarising those reasons. We're really seeing the shift in what people want and demanding out of their role. And if we don't, I think as organisations, if we're not willing to incorporate some level of flexibility, we're going to be left behind and struggle with a number of issues, such as recruitment, retention, engagement, productivity. If you're an employee and you don't feel like your organisation is hearing your needs and trying to accommodate them, people aren't going to be engaged in their role. So we need to really make sure that we're doing what we can to accommodate people. And I guess just on that as well, I'd really encourage you to really think deep and evaluate what works for your organisation. So just because you've always done something one way doesn't mean that it can't be changed. So just because you've been in the office forever doesn't mean that role can't be done at home. Just because one meeting's always required face-to-face contact doesn't mean it can't now be done remotely. So I think it really requires organisations and senior leadership to really challenge their ways of working and see what you can do to kind of move that and evolve it and meet the needs of the changing workforce. So types of flexible working. So this slide just shows some of the different types of flexible working that you might have come across. It's not an exhaustive list. There's just a couple of examples on there. What you will find in a lot of cases, which I'm sure you're all used to, is a lot of employees often combine 2 or more of those approaches. So you might find that someone's part-time and then they also do those part-time hours over condensed days. I think the main 3 elements to obviously bear in mind when you're thinking about flexible working is it's about when you work, where you work, and how much you work. And those 3 things kind of contribute together to give your pattern. So just to pull out a couple of those key bits then, so you've got a job share. So a job share is when there's a body of work that needs to be done that adds up to a full-time role, but 2 or more people complete that role. So you might have someone, for example, that works Monday, Tuesday, and then another member of staff that works Wednesday to Friday, and they job share that role and work in partnership to complete the duties of it. Part-time, so obviously part-time is an obvious one. You all know what part-time working is, but I think part-time is a really interesting one for organisations, especially when you get an employee who has been a full-time colleague and then they suddenly put a request in to be a part-time member of staff. I think at that point, it's really important for organisations to do a full review on that job and identify if some of that work does need to be reallocated, or if you can just streamline it. Maybe you can make efficiencies that you've never considered doing before. Maybe there's actual tasks that have been done for years, but actually they don't need to be done anymore. So really evaluating what that job is. And I think in a lot of cases, organisations would surprise themselves and realise that that job can probably just be done in a little bit less time. So you're actually making efficiencies and saving money. But it's really important you do that exercise. I think another thing that can happen as well is people request to go part-time, but none of that process happens. So people then end up in a position where you're doing a part-time contract, but you're expected to do the same amount of work. So people are feeling overworked and stressed and can't get everything in. And obviously that hasn't got a great result for the employee or the organisation. So really do, if you have people in your organisation requesting to go part-time, make sure you're picking up that piece to evaluate what their role looks like. Compressed hours is another one in there I'll just mention. So compressed hours is where someone works their contractor's hours over fewer days to make their days longer. So the most common one is someone is full-time. So they do, typically their job would be a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, but they decide to do 4 longer days and have a day off during the week. So that's what I personally do, and it's brilliant. So I have a young family and it saves me nursery costs for 1 day a week. I still work full-time and I get a day off a week to spend with my children, and it's brilliant. But I think whenever you're talking flexible working, it's really important to remember that employees' needs will change. So where compressed hours is perfect for me now, in 2 to 3 years' time when my children start school, it won't work. And I'll need to look at redesigning what my flexible working pattern looks like. So really make sure when you're talking flexible working with your staff that you keep having those open discussions, that you're open to reviewing it, you're engaging your staff and seeing what you need to do to not only accommodate their needs, but what works for the business as well, and making sure that that's regularly reviewed. And then where we work, just to summarise the top piece on there, so remote or hybrid, I'm sure we're all comfortable with what those approaches are, but just really allowing people to blend the way they work. So reviewing when you actually need to be in the building and when it would be more productive or beneficial for staff to spend a portion of their time at home. And if that does work for the organisation, then really encourage them to do that if it's what they need or what they want.
Okay, so thanks very much for that, Emily. So why flexible working? So I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity, but looking on various job boards, there's so many, the talent pool that comes in when you have a flexible working policy is so much greater than jobs that require you to be on site or don't offer any level of flexibility. And this speaks to a lot of the points that Emily raised earlier as to why. Then it helps diversify the workforce, and that makes sense, right? So if you have you offer this level of flexibility, then and you have a larger talent pool, then you can expect that there'll be more diversity offered. Increased staff engagement and retention. This is kind of an interesting one because some employers feel like, you know, they worry about productivity and things like that. But actually, if you have that level of flexibility, they want to maintain it and they want to keep working that way. So they tend to be very, very productive and work well. Cost savings. So obviously if there's no, if you do a fully remote situation, then there's no office space. Or even I've had situations where I've worked with companies that have an office space, but there's too much staff. So having that flexibility and people on different schedules allows for you to not have to expand your office space, but you can still get everybody in at some point during the week. Reduce travel costs and time. I'll go even further with that to say, you know, especially if you take, you know, the public transportation, we all know there's been lots of strikes, the trains, buses, a variety of things. And that obviously creates a lot of difficulty for people to get to their jobs. And having that flexibility will save time, save costs, but also make it possible. Better for the environment. I think that goes without saying. Obviously, if you're not driving your car and you're not getting in a bus or taking the train, you're saving the environment that way. Research shows increasing evidence of link between flexibility and satisfaction and commitment. I touched on that briefly with regards to engagement and retention, but basically if it's a give and take situation. You know, you feel like your company is being very flexible with you and giving you that opportunity to work from home or work hybrid, which works best for them to facilitate things like looking after their kids, looking after their parents, whatever the case may be. They're more inclined to feel happier, but also be more committed because they don't want to lose that opportunity, right? They don't want to be in a position where they lose that situation. So I think that's a really key one. An alignment with our values and employer brand. I think that goes without saying. So if you are that type of organization that's looking for, you know, to have diversity in the workplace and you know, encourage engagement and satisfaction, then it does help because it aligns with the values that that your employee brand has. Do any of you have any additional reasons as to why you can think of, have anybody in your team expressed any other reasons why they prefer to do the flexible working? Yeah, go ahead, Grishma.
So one thing that we've noticed, especially post-Brexit, a lot of demand of moving abroad, in a sense that European countries, where obviously you're in the same time zone, but, you know, obviously when you're catapulted with like cost of living crisis as well, the quality of your lifestyle in quotations, there's just a greater demand to be just in the sun, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, so I'm from Barbados originally, but I live here now with my daughter, but we still have family there. And to be able to have the option to go back to Barbados sometimes, still be able to work from there is really amazing. I think that definitely adds to it. So yeah, that's a really good point. Any others? Emma, I can't tell if your hand has been up from previously or.
Yeah, I don't know how unless I just, I've lowered my hand now. Apologies. I don't use this platform very often, to be fair. So yeah, no, I mean, I would actually just, yeah, I mean, echo sort of all the things that are on there, really. I think the well-being aspect is quite important, I think, as well, because it might be that somebody perhaps feels more comfortable in their own environment. Perhaps people who are neurodiverse might have their kind of a setup in their home, which is far more conducive for them to be working. Whereas if they're in an office where there's a lot of people around, that might not suit them. So that's one thing that we've kind of seen and looked at as well.
Okay, great. And actually, that's a very good point. Go ahead, Kirsty.
Yeah, I was just going to add that we've actually seen an uptake in people doing volunteering work because they've been able to do it maybe during the day at times when they might not have historically done it if it was going to interrupt the typical work day. So they're now able to do that and work their hours at other times. So we have seen an uptake in some of the staff doing voluntary work that's been really nice to see, actually. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's just it. I think the more companies that get involved and get on board with this this type of thinking, it will be really beneficial. I think they'll be surprised at the level of productivity, engagement and satisfaction that employees feel. Okay, so what do you currently do? Obviously, you all have mentioned about having the flexible working policies. Do you have like commitment to principles of flexible working, all of you within your organizations? Yeah. Okay. And how is your approach perceived by your team? I think if I had to guess, they'd probably say they're really happy that they have it. But have you had any situations where any of the staff have said, oh, I'd actually rather not have this option? I'd be very surprised if you did, but no. Okay. And do you apply flexibility by design, a set position, or case by case? How does that work for each of you?
I'll just go. So we do it on a case by case, and we
Mhm.
have kind of the broad option that the office is available, but home's available. And we have kind of I can't find the word. We've got a spreadsheet that all of the staff put how they want to be worked with and how they will typically work. So like I might say, well, I'm not ever going to be available before 9 because I'm doing a school run, and somebody else might say, on this day I'm doing X, Y, and Z, or I don't like to use Teams and like don't disturb me during this time, or if you want something kind of project wise, you'll have to email me rather than using another format, and those kind of things. So principles in that respect of how we work together, to kind of respect people's boundaries if they're not, because you can't see what they're doing in the office. So it was just kind of helping people understand how we could tap into our colleagues when they're not visible to us.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for sharing. Grishma, you said a bit of both. How does that work? How do you structure that?
So in a sense that we use Slack, so quite similar to
Okay.
what you said, Kirsty, like very much just putting notifications and being like, are you working from home, working away? But also we really, our approach is very much we'll try and be as flexible as we can be. With the people I line manage, for example, like as long as I think there's that bit of trust as well that that we've seen have like an increase on this when you build relationships with team members as well, to offer that flexibility by design case, where they'll be like, well, I don't want to work from home today, I want to be in the office, and you're just like, okay, go for it. Also case by case basis, in a sense, but my previous example, where if people, for example, want to move abroad and work from there for a weekend or something, very much tailoring it to how does that impact the business needs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's a good point. Go ahead, Emma.
So with us, sort of as the organisation as a whole, people do have to apply to work in a hybrid way. I know obviously working hybrid is just one part of flexible working, but taking that as an example, we do that on an application basis, just so that we can be sure that people are have the correct equipment in their home to be able to work at home, and that they are safe according to DSE guidelines and things. So it's never that we would sort of refuse that. So for an office-based, regularly office-based person, we would say, yeah, of course you can work from home, but as long as your manager's checked off with you that you have the right chair, that you have the right sort of lighting where you are. But yeah, we're really flexible in terms of the fact that if a person wanted to work from the office full time, of course they can. The only kind of parameters we do say is that we would prefer if people perhaps did 20% of their time in the office if they can, just because we do have students coming into the building. Even if you are it's sort of an office-based traditional role in that sense, we still have people coming into the building, they want to see a presence. So we kind of have that sort of parameter, I suppose. We're as flexible as we can be. Within our team, within the people team, we have like a spreadsheet where we can book a desk, because we haven't got quite enough desks, just going back to the point of having for all of us to be in at once. So we kind of book our desk, as it were, and then in our little catch up in the morning on a Monday, we kind of just say, oh hey, like I'm in the office these days this week. So we kind of have an idea of where we are, and we use Google Chat during the day, sort of every day, so at least everybody's involved, whether you're in the office or you're at home.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for sharing. Grishma?
Sorry, I just had a question on that. With regards to when team members are working from home, because one aspect, it's more of a challenge actually that we're struggling with, is the health and safety aspect. Is like, have people got the right equipment in terms of the desk spaces? But I'm sure pre-COVID we used to do those health assessments where you used to sit down and assess your desk and your neck braces and all that stuff. And I'm keen to hear both your Kirsty and obviously Emily as well, and your thoughts on how that could be navigated.
I think you can still, you know, based on my experience, that you can still do the assessment. Obviously, it means the person who's working from home has to do the assessment and has to assess like their working desk, what kind of monitor they have, that the seat is the right height and things like that. So you can still do it. And it's something that you should do on a, you know, a yearly basis, just to make sure that nothing has changed and their requirements are still being met from that perspective. Emily, do you have anything? Has your experience been anything different, or?
No, exactly the same. So just doing that annual homework and assessment form and making sure you've got kind of questions on there for people to request if they need additional stuff like monitors or anything special that they need to do their job, and making sure you're getting those out to people. I have known in circumstances, I worked with a couple of employees previously that had back issues, and we did actually get someone involved with those to go out and do a physical home assessment. So I think for the standard ones, you find to do them remote, but if you get anyone kind of with any special circumstances, look at engaging a kind of company if you don't have your own internal occupational health that can support that.
You're welcome. Okay, and then, so do you all feel empowered to consider the options, the flexibility working options? Kirsty, I know you said you're a director. Do you feel like you're empowered to make those decisions with regards to flexible working and your needs or the needs of the team?
Yeah, certainly. I think we trust our staff quite significantly to do what is right for them and do what's right for the organisation, because we spend a lot of time kind of on the values of what we are at Durham. So I think the staff came on the journey with us and now kind of don't misuse their kind of privilege, if you like, in that regard. I think that, like I mentioned earlier, the difficulty is that there is some staff that are checking out in terms of that working with others. And so it is more tricky to manage that than it is kind of just as you would have done previously, because you would have been able to see them. They would have been engaged by default, if you like. And so it's that doing that piece of work. But yeah, definitely able to consider the options quite widely.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, here at Atkinson, the team tries to do, I guess, more social things. So once a month we have like an online social, or we do get together as a team. And I think that obviously helps bridge some of that, I guess, loneliness and feeling like, you know, because it is difficult for some people to just send a message or jump on a Teams call. They feel like they're not getting that personal interaction. So I guess it's just making sure, you know, to try and incorporate things into the time. I know it's difficult because you're all so busy, but you know, I think that's important. Okay, thanks for sharing that. And then finally, how do you balance business needs, requirements of the role, and individual preference? Well, I know that's quite a difficult one because you know, for some teams, you might find that the business needs actually requires, one of you had mentioned that, you know, you need to have sometimes, because it's students union, students coming in, and you need to have people there to greet the students. So that's a business need. So you need to make sure that that's there. And then obviously the requirement of the role could be interacting with those students, and in which case, you know, again, you need someone there. So it is a balance, and it's making sure that you're able to do that. How have you found being able to balance that? I mean, is it something that's regularly participated with your teams, would you say, or you know, how has it been received? Go ahead, Grishma.
So as part of our flexible working policy, we've created a very thorough kind of like guidance document for managers, but also for team members. And when we do get any flexible working requests come in, there are like step forms that literally walk them through step by step in terms of what's being requested, but also to help managers to assess, and HR as well, in terms of how can we work collaboratively together to assess the business needs versus the individual need as well. So I think that pattern, that collaboration has been really effective so far.
Okay, well, that's great. Okay, so actually from that, I'm going to go on to talk about what some of the barriers are. So lack of trust. So this is one of the most common barriers to flexible working. And, you know, really it's kind of lack of trust between employer and their employees. But we found that employers may be surprised at just how productive workers can be when they're given the freedom to work remotely or to work flexibly and tailor their working day around their family and social life. So when employees have access to flexible working policy that benefits their health, their work-life rewarding and, work-life balance, they're unlikely to do anything to risk losing that rewarding way of working. Instead, they're actually likely to do more so they can prove how effective that level of freedom from the flexible working can be. Another one is limited understanding about flexible working. And this makes sense, right? So when people don't understand or know how something works, then they can be reluctant to try it. Change is always a difficult one. And I think, for some, not understanding exactly how it works, how they can implement it with their teams, can drive to that, can lead to that reluctancy, which is part of the next point, which is fear of change, which is quite common. People get used to and comfortable with the way things have always been, and they find it very hard to try something new, especially in instances where they lack understanding, as I mentioned above. And then there's concern about data security. So some employers have reservations about flexible working policies because they're concerned about the security of data they hold. If an employee was to lose a device or with valuable company data or confidential client information, it could be, have detrimental impact. So I think it's really making sure, and that moves to the next point about wrong technology in place. Is the technology safe? Is it cloud-based, collaborative, and communication technologies? One of you mentioned, I think it was you, Grishma, about Slack, and applications like that, which allow people to stay and communicate quite efficiently. And they're quite key. These things are quite key to flexible working. And then lack of support. Will managers and the whole team support each other while working remotely? And I think this is an interesting one, because sometimes you can get quite stuck in, you're not in the office, so you're not hearing conversations that go around, and you kind of put your head down. And so over time, you really have to make that effort to reach out to your team, to reach out to your colleagues, just check in, see how you're doing, and offer that level of support. And then the next one is specific business needs. So, there's some roles which require employees to be on site at specified times. And these types of jobs, create business needs which need to be addressed by for business continuity. So I think, we've discussed this, taking that into consideration and making sure that the business can still continue, but we find ways to make that work for the employees. And then that brings me to the last one, which is resentment between teams. There could be teams perhaps who have less availability to work flexibly because of the business needs. And this can create resentment within the team. So I think it's really important to, even from the start, from when you're into recruiting for new roles and things like that, getting a feel for how people feel about this, really creating that level of clarity about the role and what the needs are, and, but trying to find ways to make it work. Grishma, did you have a question? Yeah.
Sorry, is my hand still up? Really sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Any questions from anybody at this point? No? Okay. So how do we overcome these barriers? So the main one is create a culture that encourages performance to be evaluated based on output rather than time spent. So, people work at different phases, different ways. Some people work quicker than others. And I don't think there should be, a penalty for that. If people are performing to the level of your expectation, then if they find that they're better working in the morning and they're more productive with like maybe data analysis and things like that, maybe that works for them. And then in the afternoon, they're better on meetings. There are different ways that work for different people. And I think it's really important to create that culture around looking at performance rather than, oh, how long does it take someone to get a job done? create clear policies and procedures on flexible working. I mean, this is going to be critical because people really do need to know it's not a free-for-all. Everyone needs to understand the parameters to which they're working, and that's very important. And clearly define the roles of employees and leaders. So in the policies, what are the responsibilities of the team? What are the responsibilities of the leaders? What are your expectations of that? And make flexible working a part of your recruitment process. So I think, if you start from the beginning of the process, if this is part of your recruitment, then it's something that carries right the way through. That's the expectation that you've set. People come in. It's obviously a bit more tricky for those who are already established in the company and maybe are a bit more reluctant to change, but make it part of your recruitment process. And again, as I mentioned, it will definitely diversify and bring a larger recruitment pool, candidate pool. Make sure your technology is fit for purpose of supporting the business with flexible working patterns. So make sure that you have all the recommendations for cloud-based technology, as I mentioned, communication tools, all the apps that you need to make sure that the process runs smoothly. And then you start trial periods to start implementation of flexible working. So if it was something that you hadn't started yet, it's always good to use trial periods, see how it works, see where things can be tweaked, get feedback from your team. That's the best approach, I think, if it was something that you haven't started, but obviously all of you already have. And then measure the impact of flexible working. So, I don't know if it's something that you do now, but maybe do catch-ups with your team to see how they find it. If there's things, have open dialogue about it and see how things are working. If you find that, productivity is an issue, which I would be surprised about, but if you did, have discussions about that, just always make sure that you keep feedback going and regular communication, I think, is helpful. Are there any particular barriers that you have encountered that you want us to think about or discuss? No? Okay. All right. So on to the next, which is the 4-day week. You're on mute, Emily.
There we go. Thanks, Sam. So the 4-day week, I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's been a bit of a buzz topic. It's been in the media a lot. It's made a lot of headlines. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time looking at what the 4-day week is, what we mean by it, and a little bit of the pilot study and what the outcome of that was. So these are just some of the examples of the articles you can see discussing the 4-day week. So what do we mean by the 4-day week? So it's a reduction in working days from 5 to 4. So essentially people do 20% less hours for the same pay and benefits. So it's a commitment to still achieving the same level of output, but by doing that through working less time. So I guess this presents obvious challenge in terms of how you achieve that. And I guess the key really is really looking at how you can make efficiencies, utilising technology to do roles, and streamlining things wherever possible. I guess there's also the flip side of that. So the argument that is the 4-day week just the natural result of the technological advances that we're seeing now, and can jobs be done in 4-day weeks and give employees all the benefits that come with that? So the pilot study, so I don't know how much you all know about the pilot study, but I'll kind of talk through it and then we can have a little discussion around what we think around it at the end. So it was a 6-month trial of the 4-day week. So it was 3,500 workers involved from all over the world. And it was based on that 100% of the pay for 80% of the time in exchange for delivering 100% of the output. So 92% of the companies, which is really interesting actually, so 92% of the companies have decided to implement it permanently after the trial, or just extend the trial for another 6 or 12 months to continue to see how it works in their organisation, which is massive and really interesting. So the vast majority of companies were satisfied that performance and productivity was maintained. So some of the outcomes of that, so talk around what they look like. So stress and burnout for employees both significantly declined. 71% of employees reported lower levels of burnout. Reported levels of anxiety, fatigue, and sleep issues decreased. Mental and physical health improved. So I guess when you look at most people's work patterns at the minute, a lot of people work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And I guess we can all say realistically, for a lot of people on a Friday, your work often extends a little bit into a Friday evening. You're still thinking about it. Are you finishing things up for your next week? And for a lot of people, you maybe start thinking about work again on a Sunday evening. What does my Monday look like? Have I got something I need to make sure I've got together? So realistically, in terms of time when people actually shut down from work, it's quite limited on a weekend for a lot of people. It can often just be a Saturday. So actually having that 3-day break allows people that time to really switch off, recharge, and be ready for the next week. People reported that their work-life balance improved. So people found it much easier to balance family life, social commitments, and were more satisfied with kind of their relationships, how they've managed their finances. People generally did just really report an increased standard and happiness with how their life was. Interesting actually as well. So companies' revenue stayed broadly the same. I think actually the average was just over 1.5%. The revenue increased by, which is really interesting. And I think it just creates an environment where people find ways to work more efficiently. I know for me personally, if I know I've got a deadline or I'm about to go on leave, I've got a lot to do, you suddenly start to kind of run a little bit on adrenaline and you're working really efficiently. You're really using your day productively to the best of its ability. Whereas if you've got a project where you know you've got 6 months to do and it's quite relaxed in terms of how that comes along, you will probably take the 6 months to do it because people generally just work a little bit slower. But if you know that if you get all your work done in this time, you get a longer break and time to spend with your family, you'll see that people probably find their own ways to get things done in a more efficient way. The other one, so employees reported that it was 50% more likely that they wouldn't quit their job, so really increasing job retention, and sick days massively decreased as well. I guess when you look at people working 5 days a week and then trying to cram in things on a weekend, seeing friends, seeing family, just having a little bit of time to recharge, but not having a great deal of time to recharge, people are feeling a little bit run down. You're really busy. It feels like people don't get much chance to rest. So then people's immune systems are lower, people are picking bugs up, and then people end up being off sick. But by naturally just having a little bit more time to fit in your social activities and recharge, sick days massively reduced as well. So just before I move on, actually, on the 4-day week, has anyone got any experience of using the 4-day week, or might not be you directly, any friends or family you know that have tried it, or what are your opinions on it? Yeah, go on, Emma.
I don't have any experience, unfortunately, of using it myself, but I thank you for all those stats, because actually I find it really interesting. I'm going to have a look at that website there that's linked, but I would be all for it. And I think there's been sort of some kind of casual discussion about that within sort of our organisation. And I think the initial kind of thoughts were sort of from higher up than myself. Oh, no, we couldn't do that. And but I feel like the benefits are huge, and I can really see that in all those stats there. So I think I'll be taking this information back my people, because I find it really interesting. I mean, I think it's funny actually, because obviously we've had a couple of 4-day weeks because of the bank holiday just recently. And having that extra time I think is really important, because like you say, trying to cram all the other stuff into like your Saturday and a Sunday traditionally, you got your housework to do as well and your washing and all this stuff. It's really tough, but yeah, so thank you. So not much to add there, but just to say thank you for that information, because it's really handy.
Brilliant, thanks. Grishma, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so we've just done our annual staff survey, and the demand for a 4-day week was very loud and clear. Obviously, I'm guessing based off the pilots as well. And as a way to kind of sort of trial it, so in around summertime, so from the 1st of June, the first full week of June till the end of August, we have these things called summer hours, where they're just kind of compressed and reduced hours on Fridays, so early finishes. And one work we're going to trial is doing a bit of a 35-hour week, where it's Fridays just like a half day, but they don't need to make up those times elsewhere else as well. So very keen to see the outcomes of our study there as well, in terms of what actually happens.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. You'll have to let us know how you get on. It sounds great. Just seeing, Emma, you added a comment there. You love the idea of summer hours. Yeah, me too. It'd definitely be nice to have shorter days to make the most of the sun and barbecues and seeing family. You're on mute, Sam.
Sorry. Yes,
We
I
haven't
meant to
got
come
the
off of
hang
mute.
of this, have
Yeah. Other trends. So future world of work report. So more than 2/3 of employees, so 67% believe that offering flexibility is crucial when it comes to competing for people with the most sought after skills. 56% of leaders would allow employees to choose which or how many days they work. That's an interesting one. How many days they work. I think you might run into problems if you start saying, well, I only want to work one day, but it really is. I think people are reasonable enough to understand that once they can get their job done in a particular time frame, that's really, I think, the crux of the matter. Once the business needs are being met, there really is no reason not to have these other trends being offered. Flexible working index between January 2022 and December 2022, the number of job seekers expressing a preference for remote first roles more than tripled, rising from 9% to 31%. And I can definitely believe that to be the case. I mean, you're just seeing more and more in jobs that come up. The number of applicants you get for remote first, I mean, 200 plus sometimes for these remote first jobs. And it's interesting because some of these have been people applying for roles that maybe don't even fit necessarily within their scope, but they're just so interested in having that remote work option that they look at seeing what transferable skills they can use into various jobs. So it's actually quite interesting. And then preferences for roles with fully flexible working hours increased by 23% in 2022, with 27% of all job seekers looking for roles with flexibility over timings. During each month of 2022, the index tracked a rise in job seekers expressing a preference for fully flexible hours. So again, I think that's really important, and I think the data speaks for itself in terms of what what's out there. I think Emma asked a question. Okay. If you're interested in proposing them in your organization, please do let me know and I can ping over guidance plans on action. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Grishma. I'll drop you a line on that. Thank you.
Okay. Next. Emily, you're on mute.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks. So future options. So there's a couple of different things we can look at. So the first one might be so reducing contracted hours to the equivalent of a 4-day week, but maybe not having one specific shutdown day. So it may be possible to look at a different reduction. So whether you can shorter days during the week or a couple of half days, or even if you just look at reducing your working hours to 4.5 days, looking at something that might work for your organisation. I guess this is really, really beneficial because it will allow you to maybe tailor it for various staff and have different days so people can keep the business running. But I guess that does obviously come with challenges around logistics, making it difficult to manage when people are working, managing relationships with external stakeholders, annual leave entitlement, all those kind of things. But I think if a little bit of thought is given around the logistics of kind of different and unique ways of making it work, it can definitely be achieved. Implementing the actual 4-day week, just going for it on a trial and seeing how it works. So looking at other shutdown periods, I know a lot of organisations that shut down for Christmas see it as a really good perk. So it's that great opportunity for colleagues to kind of relax and unwind and recharge for work. So a lot of people, when you kind of book in annual leave throughout the year, are utilising that to do something, whether that's going travelling or seeing friends, seeing family, attending a wedding. And they're all really nice things. But actually, when you come back from your annual leave, I know for me personally, I've got 2 little children. I'm more tired than when I first went off. So you don't actually feel recharged. So I think sometimes just having a designated shutdown period where people may choose to go kind of traveling or do things, and obviously they can do with that as they wish, but having a designated shutdown period, which is just recognised as kind of a rest period within the organisation, can be really nice. And I guess doing it over summer as well. I know a lot of European countries do it, and I think it's just really nice giving people that time, and hopefully it's a little bit of nicer weather. People can make time for their family. And actually, August is always a challenging month when you're in the business because so many people are off. When you're trying to get information or pin someone down for a meeting or just get some answers you need, it can be really challenging. So yeah, August is a great month to look at doing that. Unlimited annual leave. So this is an interesting one. I'd be interested to hear if any of you have got any experiences with this at the end. So I think unlimited annual leave is good, and it can be really empowering for employees. So it really gives employees the ownership and responsibility of their hours. So it does encourage people to find efficient ways of working, because if they can find the efficient ways of working and get their job done, then they can kind of use the leave that suits them with no limit. I guess there is cons to that, so disadvantages. So people could take advantage of the system. So does the quality of work get compromised? Are people just rushing through things to try and get it done so they can take off excessive amounts of leave? But I think if you do end up in that situation, then that's kind of issues that you can deal with on an individual basis rather than kind of changing the whole scheme. I think one of the biggest things is the anxiety around it. So unlimited annual leave is never unlimited, right? At the end of the day, we've all still got a job to do and kind of deadlines and targets to meet. So it's people start to compare themselves. You can start to see what other people in your team or department have taken. It's like, oh, if I take this leave request, I'm going above what the other people in my team are doing. Is that okay? So yes, in practice they work, but I think it just needs really clear kind of guidance and communication in terms of what that looks like, what the parameters are, and how that can work. If you've got a good business model to make it work, it's definitely achievable. Have any of you guys had any experience with unlimited annual leave? No? What do we think of it? Is it something that you would like? Kirsty?
I
Yes.
struggle to get some of them staff to take their actual allowance of leave. So I don't know. I'd struggle even more. I think I've given them unlimited leave, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. I get the apprehension and the kind of the worry that the misuse. I think where I am working currently, I don't think it would be, but I can certainly see in previous roles that I've had or jobs, it could be misused. I think the other problem is as well is that if you've got several people doing the same job, and colleagues end up picking up the slack, so you're not kind of accountable for your own work, if you like. It's a shared endeavor. It's that monitoring of performance, and I think it's very tricky for managers to do that. And it is a development for managers to be able to have those conversations or to deal with this situation. I like it in principle, but I think I'd struggle a little bit with it. I certainly like the shared shutdowns a lot better, and it sits a lot better with me than the unlimited leave, definitely. It's something that we've been talking about in terms of the shared shutdown, because we enforced it when we put staff on furlough during COVID. And like you said about leave, you come back a little bit stressed, but also you can still see maybe notifications pinging on your phone. You can still see like the world's going on. But when everybody's off over Christmas, nothing's happening. So it's fine, and you don't have to go, oh, should I look at my emails or do I dare not? Or there's something gone wild at work and I don't want to know. So like you never fully turn off, I don't find. So I think that's the advantage of that as well.
No, thank you. That's a really good point. I'm exactly the same. I know when you're on leave, you're like, oh, I'll just have a quick look at my work phone, or I check my emails, and then you're not really on leave, are you? You end up diving back into something, which, yeah, I think that's a really good advantage of the shutdown. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Grishma, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so I think just to kind of echo Kirsty, in a sense that I feel like this, again, I don't have a physical experience with this, but managing right now a team, our organization's about 80, and I just think logistically that would be just a bit of a nightmare. But it would also, I think, if organizations were to implement unlimited annual leave, I think it has to go hand in hand with really good effective management training as well, like line management training as well, because we're in a similar boat, Kirsty, where we've got people carrying over annual leave and we're just trying to encourage them to take them this year. Whereas like for different teams as well, it's just proving to be a lot more of a challenge.
Definitely, and I don't think it's for every organisation. I think it requires an organisation to have really kind of clear objectives, targets, and robust ways for measuring against those. Or like you say, it's just going to become a challenge. Okay, so the final slide I'll talk through then is how to support managers and I guess get buy-in to flexible working practices. So being open with staff and having discussions. So developing the skills amongst your management team to understand the culture and why it's needed, and have those open conversations about well-being and what is going to suit your staff and how you balance that against business needs and find a way of working that suits both. So really equipping your managers with the staff to have those kind of needed conversation. Encourage boundary setting as well, and make sure people have got routines to improve well-being and overwork. So if people are working flexibly, encourage people to like send delays on their emails so they don't get them the next day. Allow people to not work on an evening, and the boundaries are really in place. Oh, sorry, I've just seen that you've got another meeting, Grishma. No problem. Thank you for joining. So yeah, building in time to have those face-to-face discussions and really encouraging team collaboration. Facilitate networking and inter-team relationships. It's really important that you're finding time to connect with your teams, whether that be over kind of fun team activities that you do over Teams, or whether you're meeting them in person, but really make sure that human interaction is not lost. And organise a wider support network. So I think when you're working remotely or even just hybrid, there's a loss from informal learning, that whether you learn things just in the office, you overhear your colleagues talking, or you just get into a conversation that you wouldn't naturally have when you're working from home. And organisations really need to find ways to kind of plug those gaps, or people are going to try and struggle. So whether that's having really robust kind of systems and structures in place with guidance documents and support, or kind of pairing people up with a buddy so there's always someone to go to, or recognise people in your organisation that are the subject experts so it's obvious who you go to if you need a little bit of support. I think all of these are tools to help people really make sure they continually learn and don't struggle being at home on their own. And good performance development is key. So ensuring staff really know their goals and objectives and are clear on them, and that you have clear processes in place for measuring against those. So I guess the challenge you might get from managers and senior leaderships when you're talking about flexible working is why all the stuff we've talked about today, it can often be perceived as a lot of effort and a lot of challenge. Is it not just easier to have people in the office 5 days a week and avoid some of these issues that you have to go through? But absolutely not, because it's not what people want, and we have to recognise that, and we have to move with what our staff need. And by engaging them, we've discussed it throughout the webinar, but you're absolutely going to get staff that will be loyal to the organisation and more willing to give back if you're willing to accommodate them and let them have those flexible hours around their children, around their family. If you've got a business need when something comes up and it needs someone to work a bit later one evening, or even pick something up when they wouldn't typically work, people will be much more willing to do that, because people appreciate that flexibility is a two-way stream. So it's absolutely just reminding managers of that yes, you're giving flexibility to them, you'll make them happier, you'll make them more engaged, and ultimately they'll give back. So reminding them of that. And I guess if you're still struggling with buy-in, just show them the statistics of kind of what flexible working does. If you just look on LinkedIn, so you can see jobs, if one job has hybrid or remote attached to it, the amount of application it gets in comparison to a job that says on site 5 days a week is a significant difference. So all the kind of really good talent you could be missing out on getting into your organisation just by not redesigning the ways of working is a really interesting one. And I guess just on recruitment material as well. So if you do offer flexibility in your organisation, then shout about it. Because for those exact reasons, if you're not putting it on your recruitment material, you might be putting candidates off when it might be something that you do. So just make sure that you're really shouting about it and making it clear and visible on all your kind of recruitment material. And that is the end. I don't know if you've got anything additional to add, Sam, before we finish.
No, just thank you very much for participating. I mean, these things are, I think we're all going through a period of change, and flexible working certainly, and the need for it and the drive for it definitely came out of the pandemic. And I think, working towards attaining that is really important. Do you guys have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you. Oh, apologies, Kirsty. I just wanted to say thank you, because it's some really, really interesting information there. We're lucky that we've got really good sort of management buy-in. They can see the benefits already, so it's really good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for attending.
Yeah, and thank
Just
you
wish
both
somebody
for...
would tell the politicians that it's a good thing, because I'm sick of hearing the tripe that comes out about
and Elon Musk as well.
Yeah,
thank
but
you
no.
for kind of contributing and being involved as well. It's really nice to hear kind of what you guys do in your organisation. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. All
Enjoy
right.
the rest of your day.
You too.
Yeah,
Bye.
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 Bye.